All right, y'all. Thank you for joining me. I am going to show you how to feed a sourdough starter and get it ready to make bread. I'm going to say I'm not a professional. I've been doing sourdough for about a year and a half. I'm making these videos primarily because I've had a few friends and family members ask how to make bread, and I figured it might be easier to do a video. That way anybody can watch it and go back to it. And I do this for fun. I make it for myself, my family, and I just enjoy it. And if I don't do this technically the way some professionals would, this is what works for me. I made bread this morning, and this is the loaf I got that I'm happy with. So I'm not changing the way I do it. I am going to show you first a few of the tools I use and the steps that I take. So when you are feeding your sourdough starter, and I will show you here, this is all the starter I keep. It is about 37 or 38 grams, and it is a stiff sourdough starter. So I do not keep any discard. I do not feed this daily. I feed this when I'm going to bake. Otherwise, it lives in my fridge. I have left this for up to 2 weeks before without feeding it, and it's still been very active and fine. This won't go bad. It might go dormant if you keep it in the fridge, but it will not go bad. And so I would recommend, if you leave this in the fridge for more than 2 weeks, you're going to give it an extra feeding, and I'll kind of explain that in a little bit what that means. But right now it is a Thursday evening. I took my starter out of the fridge earlier today so it could come up to room temperature. That's important. You want your starter to be at room temperature before you feed it. You don't want to feed it cold. Your starter is just a combination of water, which I have here, and flour. And I just use all-purpose flour when I'm feeding it, and then for my recipe I use whatever it calls for, whether it is bread flour, whole wheat, that kind of thing, or a combination. So that's the only two ingredients you need to actually make your starter. And then some of the other tools I use are, I have a kitchen scale that goes up to 11 pounds. I think I got it while out thrifting, actually. I don't even think I bought it, but I think they're like 10 or 20 bucks on Amazon. They're pretty cheap. And so I prefer to weigh my ingredients. If you don't have a kitchen scale, you can convert things to measurements. I'm sure you can Google it. And then I like something to scoop out my flour that's a little narrower because I use narrow jars. And then I like using, this is my Vitamix spatula, but you can use any kind of smaller spatula. And I like a chopstick too because it's easy. And then I just have a plain larger jar. This is what we're going to make our starter for the recipe in. So I think that is kind of all you need to know right now. I have a phone that has a calculator on that too. It's just going to make doing this all a lot easier. So I plan on making a sandwich loaf, so 2 sandwich loaves. When I bake, I like baking 2 loaves at a time. Usually we'll eat one, and either we'll save the other one and we'll go through it that week, or we'll throw it in the freezer for another time. I don't remember where I got my sourdough loaf recipe. I'm sure I just Googled it, and then I wrote it. I don't know if you can see that, but I'll see if I can find it. I just wrote it down, and that's what I keep on my counter. It basically, the recipe for the sandwich loaf, and I'll do a separate video over the next few days to show you how I feed my starter in the morning, and I do the mixing of the sandwich loaf, and then a couple days later I'll show you how I bake it off. So my recipe for the sandwich loaf calls for, and I'm doubling it because there again I said I make 200 or 200 loaves of bread. So this is a doubled recipe. And you can definitely make one if you want to, but I use 800 grams of bread flour, 200 grams of water, and 200 grams of milk. I do 200 grams of starter, 40 grams of honey, 40 grams of olive oil, and 16 grams of salt. And I'll show you step by step how to do that tomorrow. And let's see. So all we're doing tonight is, it is in the evening, and you might have to play around with your times if you don't follow the exact same schedule. For me, I like to feed my starter at night because it's smaller than I think a lot of people use. I don't do like a 1-to-1 ratio. I'm not really going to explain what that is. You can Google it since I'm not going to do it. But since I'm using a smaller amount of starter, it's going to take longer to rise, which is like why I like to let it rise all night and then it's ready in the morning when I'm ready to mix. If you're doing this and letting it rise overnight, then you might, there again, play around with your times depending. So what we're going to start and do is figure out some math first. So I'm going to get my scale here and I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to see if I can show you. So mine will automatically pull up ounces on here, but if I hit the unit button, I can hit it down till I get to grams. That's the unit you want to be on. And then mine also has a Z and a T button. If you press that when something's on the scale, it'll zero it out. So the way I use this is right now, I'm at 0 because I have nothing on my scale here. If I put this empty container on right now, it says it's 181 grams. Well, I don't care about that. I want to know how much I'm putting in as far as a measurement. So if I hit the T button with that on, it's going to basically show it at 0, and that's how you're going to basically do measurements, and I'll walk you through this. So right now, this is the math we need to do. So let's do this first. And turn that on. These are the same jars, so I know these jars are going to weigh the same. So right now, this is an empty jar. If I put the one with stuff in it, it reads 37 grams now, which means I have 37 grams of starter in here. When I feed my starter, I keep 5 grams behind, so I can basically make another mini jar. So this is how you keep going over and over again. All you need is 5 grams, which is barely anything. It's basically almost the scrapings off this jar. And then that's what you're going to use to keep your starter going. And then the rest of it, you're going to put it in your bigger jar, and we're going to make whatever calls for it in the recipe. So like I said, this is 37 grams. So if I want to leave 5 grams, and I'll just tell you, I use this jar over and over and over and over again. When I feed my starter, I don't put it in a new jar. I just take out what I need, and then I just keep using it. It doesn't get moldy, it doesn't get yucky. If you feel better, you can definitely take out 5 grams, put it in a clean jar, and then wash this. And when I say wash, I want to be very explicit, and this has not happened to me, but I've heard it has happened to a lot of people. Do not wash your starter down the drain. It will become rock hard, and it can clog your pipes. So you want to get as much of your starter, when you're cleaning jars and things like that, you want it to go in the trash can or wipe it out as best you can. In our sink, we had the little mesh strainers, which catches a lot of the starter in it as well, so we don't have much going down the drain, but it can clog your drain if you're putting larger amounts. So to get to it, if I want to keep 5 grams in this jar, it means I need to take, what is that, 32 grams and put it in my larger jar, because that's what we're going to use to make our big recipe. So I'm just going to take this and I'm just going to go around and honestly scoop most of this out. That is my thick starter. It's not wet, it's not runny, and I'm just going to plop that in there. And now it says I've got only 3 grams left measuring in the jar. So I'm going to see if I can just get a teeny tiny bit, like 2 grams out of it here. It does not have to be exact. If all I had was 3 grams in there, I could still do just 3 grams and nothing's really gonna happen. But let's try to be accurate for the sake of the video. And this is why I like using a chopstick. It just makes things easier to use. It is exactly at 5 grams right now. So the next step is we need to feed this itty bitty, and you can see in here, there's really, I don't know how to get a focus. But you can see it looks like only the scrapings on the jar. There's really nothing in here, but it is 5 grams. So what we need to do next is we are going to hit that little T button to tear it out back to 0. So we already know there's 5 grams and the weight of this jar. So now if you hit the tear button, it goes back to 0 grams. And I need to measure out 12 grams of water. That's all I use is 12 grams of water. And that red 13 is what I poured in, and it just went down to 12. So it's kind of teetering. If it's 13, doesn't matter. There again, doesn't have to be accurate to the exact gram. We just want to get as close as possible. And like I said, I make a thick starter, so I do not feed the same amount of water as I do flour. So I do 12 grams of water and 20 grams of flour to feed my starter. And so it makes like a very thick consistency. It's not going to pour out of your jar. So I'm going to again press the tear button so I know I had the right amount of water. I want to get back to 0. Now all I'm going to do is, this is my all-purpose flour right here. I'm just going to take my little scoop and just scoop it in till I get to 20. That's 17, 18, 19, just a tad bit more. Still 19, 20. Okay. So we are at 20 in here. So you can just see it is the flour and the water and the little bit of starter. And all I'm going to do is mix this till it's all combined. There again, that's why I like my little skinny spatula or chopstick, because it makes this job a lot easier. You do want to get as much combined as you can, especially on the bottom. So all I'm just doing is kind of pushing this around so it kind of, the little bit of water in here absorbs the flour. I'm not too meticulous as far as like all the excess like starter on the side of my jar. Like I said, I don't use a clean jar every time I feed it, and you can if you want to again. So all I'm doing, and this is not going to be used in my recipe. This is what I'm going to be using next time I want to make bread. So that little bit I showed you at the beginning. So basically that's what it's looking like. It's just it's about 37 or 38 grams again. That's the inside, but that's kind of the consistency you want it. Almost like a Play-Doh. So what I do is, to get all the extra off, I'm just going to scrape with my chopstick. And just try to get that all in. And there again, it's thick, so there's that. That is done. So this is our main starter. This is what we're going to use next time when we want to make bread there again. What I'm going to do is, I just use a canning lid. I don't use a ring. I just lay it on top. When it sits in the fridge, it sits in the fridge the same way. I don't seal anything down. That way it's got a chance to breathe. What I'm going to do is keep this on the counter overnight. This is going to rise, and it's going to look fluffy in the morning, but it's going to still be thick. It's just not going to be like a ball like you see here. It will kind of expand to the bottom of the jar. But this is our main starter. That's all we keep. So no discard or anything else. And now we're going to move on to the recipe. So already I know I put 32 grams of starter in here because I had to take 5 out of what I had. So my recipe for sandwich dough calls for 200 grams of starter. So how do I get to 200 grams if I only have 35 in here? So since this isn't fully active to bake with, I need to feed this to get this started as well. So this is where your calculator comes in handy, and I don't know if this is the way other people do it. This is the way I do it. I didn't really learn this from anyone that I know of. It's just the way I do it. So if I need 200 grams of starter, and I've got 32 grams in here of this already, I am going to subtract out the 32 out of the 200. So I need 168 grams more of flour and water. Well, if your recipe is only calling for 200 grams and you need to put flour and water in here, what I like to do is make sure for my recipe, my flour and my water is at an equal ratio. So if I need 168 more grams, I'm going to divide the 168 divided by 2, and that's 84. So in order to get to 200, I need 84 grams of flour and 84 grams of water. Usually I bump it up another gram, so I'll do 85 and 85. And the reason I say that is because when I go to scrape out my jar into my recipe when I make it tomorrow, it's not gonna all come out of this jar. So I like to have maybe an extra gram or 2 to work with. Sometimes I'll even round this up maybe to 86 and 86. There again, it doesn't have to be exact for your recipe. It's just depending on how much you put in is how fast things are gonna rise and how warm. It's all a big science experiment, but I don't like to make things too complicated and overly tough. So what I'm going to do is I've got my jar here. I've got my 32 grams of starter. I'm going to tare it back to 0. And now I'm going to put in 85 grams of water into this jar. $76, $79, $80, $84. $85. So I'm at 85 in here. And when I'm making it for my recipe, you can stir it around now if you want. I don't. So I'm going to hit the tare button again till I get back to 0. And now I'm going to take my flour and I'm going to add 85 grams of flour. So just like we did with this, we're feeding it flour and water, but in this case we're doing equal amounts of flour and water. So this is going to be a lot thinner. It's not going to be a thick ball like our regular starter. And I'm at 86, so since my flour is not all wet, I'm just taking a little bit out. So I'm at 85 now. So this is our jar, and you want to make sure you're using a big jar because this will probably reach up to like here maybe tomorrow morning when we go to check on it. So you are going to want to make sure you use a big enough jar so you don't overflow it because in the morning this will be very active. So all I'm going to do is gently stir all this around till everything is incorporated. You don't want any bits or chunks of flour or starter or anything like that in there. So all right. So this is kind of the consistency we've got now. For this, it is like I said, it's not runny, but it is definitely not something that is like the other one. It's not like a ball or anything. So all I'm going to do is There again, clean my spatula off as much as possible, and then that way I don't have anything going down the sink drain when I go to wash these afterwards. And that's basically all that's left on my utensils. And this is what it looks like inside. You can see it's pretty good. When this rises, it'll kind of collect the stuff on the side, so I'm not worried about it either. There again, I just use like a little lid that sits on top. You want to kind of, you don't want to cut the air off. You don't want it to be airtight. So I'm going to leave this on my counter overnight. Like I said, it's about 6 o'clock in the evening, and usually I will let this, sometimes I feed at 9 o'clock, sometimes I feed now. It just depends, but this will sit out all night. I'm not, like I said, a stickler about if this is at peak and falling. If it falls, it's fine. It's active enough for me to make nice bread. I'm not a professional, so I don't have to make anything perfect. But these 2 jars, there again, will sit out overnight. This one, if I don't bake again this week, will go into the fridge once it's all risen. So I'll show you in the morning what that looks like, and I'll put it in the fridge. And this one will be used tomorrow when we actually make our sandwich loaf recipe. But let me show you just another little tip while I got you here. So I said this recipe calls for 200 grams of starter. When I make my crusty loaves here, the recipe I use calls for 255 grams of starter. So it's the same kind of idea. If I need 255 grams, I'm always going to take out everything that I don't need to keep behind for my regular starter. So if I have 37 grams and take out 5 grams for my starter, I'm going to still have 32 grams, but all I'm going to do is take my calculator and take 255 grams minus the 32. 223 grams is what I need to split between my flour and water again. So if I divide that by 2, I would need about 112 grams of each to make this recipe. So it's not a huge deal. It's just going to mean if I need more starter, and which means I'm using more flour and water instead of actual starter, it's just going to take a little longer to rise. And that's why I let it go overnight, because that's plenty of time to give your starter enough time to rise. You could even, if you wanted to, make 2 different recipes. So you could take like 16 grams of starter for one recipe, 16 grams of another one, and then add your flour and water to make that. It'll work either way. It's there again, you'll just need more time to let things rise. But for now, we are done. I'm going to go ahead and clean up, and then tomorrow I will make another video, and I will show you what our starters look like in the morning. I'm going to show you how to make the sandwich loaf recipe. And if I can find the actual recipe where I got it from, I'll link that in the comments below. But thanks, guys, and I hope y'all learned something.